The setup is a sheet of coarse filter foam and a bag of lava rock. Between them, they cost about $8. They go inside whatever filter housing you already own, and neither of them will ever need replacing for as long as you keep fish. You cut the foam to the shape of the cartridge you are throwing away. You put the rock in a mesh bag behind it, and that is the last filter media you ever buy. But the media is not the interesting part of this video. The interesting part is the shape of the cartridge itself, because that shape was not chosen for filtration performance, and once you understand why 3 completely different materials are glued to one plastic frame, you will see the whole category differently. Here's the routine you are probably running. Every 4 weeks or so, you lift the lid off your filter and pull out the cartridge, and it is brown and heavy and unpleasant. You drop it in the bin and slide in a fresh white one, and the water looks better within a day, which confirms that you did the right thing. Then you reach the end of the pack and you go back to the shop and discover that the cartridges for your filter are only made by the company that made your filter, and that the almost identical looking ones on the shelf beside them do not fit. So you buy the correct 3-pack. And you have now been doing that for 2 years without ever once asking why a piece of equipment you paid good money for cannot run without a proprietary consumable that only one company sells. Put a figure on it. A 3-pack of branded cartridges runs between $7 and $14 and lasts 3 months at the recommended schedule. So a single tank costs between $80 and $150 a year. 2 or 3 tanks, which is where most people in this hobby end up, is $200 to $400 a year, every year, indefinitely. Add the carbon inserts, the phosphate pads, and the polishing pads sold as separate stages for the same housing. The foam and rock that replace all of it is a one-time purchase of roughly $8, and there is no second purchase after it. There's also no packet to run out of on a Sunday, no discontinued format to discover in 3 years when the manufacturer updates the housing, and no situation in which your filtration depends on one company continuing to stock one shape. The cartridge is worth examining because its design tells you exactly what it is for. Pick one up and look at what you are actually holding. There is a rigid plastic frame, which does no filtration whatsoever and exists purely to give the assembly a shape that fits one manufacturer's housing. Bonded to that frame is a layer of polyester floss which traps particles. Sealed inside is a quantity of activated carbon which absorbs dissolved organics. And after a few weeks, colonized across all of it, is a bacterial film doing your biological filtration. 4 components, permanently fused into a single disposable unit. Now consider that those 4 components have completely different working lives. The activated carbon is genuinely exhausted within 2 to 4 weeks, because adsorption fills a finite surface and then stops. The floss does not wear out at all. It simply loads with debris, and rinsing restores it. The plastic frame lasts forever, and the bacterial colony is the one component that gets better the longer you leave it, reaching full maturity at around 6 to 8 weeks and then staying there for years. Bonding those 4 things together means the disposal schedule of the shortest lived component governs everything else in the assembly. You are throwing away a permanent frame, a washable pad, and a mature bacterial colony every month in order to renew a few grams of carbon, and in most freshwater tanks, that carbon was not doing anything you needed in the first place. That business model has a name and a documented history, and it is not specific to fish keeping. It is called razor and blades, after the safety razors sold cheaply in the early 1900s so that the proprietary blades could be sold forever afterward, and you already meet it every time you buy a printer cartridge or a coffee pod. The device is the entry point. The consumable is the business. And the mechanism that holds the whole thing together is format, which is why the cartridge for your filter is a shape that nothing else fits, and why the housing was molded around that shape rather than around a standard one. That is not a scandal, and almost every consumer category on Earth does the same thing. What matters here is that in a printer, the consequence is that you overpay. In a filter, the consumable you are being made to discard is alive. That distinction is worth sitting with, because it is what separates this from an ordinary complaint about markup. If a printer cartridge is overpriced, the cost is money and nothing else. Here, the item on the disposal schedule is a bacterial population that took 6 to 8 weeks to establish and that your fish depend on for their survival. And the schedule printed on the packet asks you to replace it roughly twice as often as it can fully form. The product is not merely expensive. It is asking you to interrupt the one process in your aquarium that most needs to be left alone. Before I get into the mechanism, one thing worth saying now. Media is one part of a system with several, and your stocking, feeding, and maintenance schedule decide what any filter is being asked to handle. I have put the complete version together in one place as a full aquarium playbook, covering how every layer supports the others. The link is in the description and in the top pinned comment, and if the code is on your screen right now, you can scan it and go straight there. Now here is what is actually happening inside that housing, and it starts with separating 3 jobs that the cartridge deliberately merges: mechanical filtration traps, suspended particles, and it is the least important of the 3. Chemical filtration absorbs dissolved compounds onto activated carbon and is optional in a normal fresh water tank. Biological filtration is the conversion of ammonia to nitrite and nitrite to nitrate by bacteria, primarily Nitrosomonas and Nitrospira species, and it is the only one of the 3 that keeps your fish alive. Run those 3 functions on separate pieces of media, and each one can be serviced on its own schedule. Fuse them into one unit, and you cannot service any of them without destroying the others. If you have ever pulled a cartridge out at the end of its month and noticed that the floss was still perfectly serviceable, just loaded with brown material that would rinse out in 20 seconds, you have already noticed the problem without naming it. Nothing about that pad had failed. It was doing exactly what a mechanical stage is supposed to do, which is fill up. In a filter with separate stages, filling up is not a reason to discard something, it is a reason to squeeze it. The only thing in that assembly that had genuinely reached the end of its useful life was a few grams of carbon sealed inside where you could not reach it, and the only reason the whole unit went in the bin is that the manufacturer decided you should not be able to reach it. Here is why the replacements never wear out, which is the part that sounds too good and is simply materials science. Reticulated polyurethane foam is a chemically inert plastic lattice. It has no consumable capacity, nothing about it is used up by filtering water, and the only thing that changes is that debris accumulates in it, which you remove by squeezing. Lava rock is volcanic scoria formed when molten rock cools with gas still escaping through it, which leaves a mineral riddled with interconnected pores. It is inert, it is already the product of extreme heat, and there is nothing in an aquarium capable of degrading it. Neither material has a wear-out mechanism, because neither is chemically participating in anything. They are scaffolding. The biofilm growing on that scaffolding is what does the work, and biofilm is a living population that renews itself continuously. You are not buying a filter medium that gets consumed. You are buying a surface for something to live on. That distinction explains something people find hard to believe about this setup, which is that the media does not merely last, it improves. A cartridge is at its absolute best on the day you install it and declines from there, as the carbon exhausts and the floss loads. Foam and porous rock run in exactly the opposite direction. On day 1, they are sterile and nearly useless. At 6 to 8 weeks, they are carrying a mature colony. At 2 years, they are carrying a colony that has weathered every fluctuation your tank has produced and has stabilized around your particular stocking and feeding. The oldest piece of media in your filter is the most valuable thing in the aquarium, and the cartridge schedule guarantees that you never own one, and that is why the monthly replacement costs more than the money. Every time a cartridge goes in the bin, the mature colony living on it goes with it, and the sterile replacement has no biological activity at all. The tank runs a partial cycling event. Ammonia rises for several days. Most people are not testing in the week after a media change, so they never see the reading, but the fish are in it, and repeated low-level ammonia exposure damages gill tissue and suppresses immune function over months. Then a fish gets sick, and it is treated as an unrelated incident, and the same schedule continues. The hobbyist concludes their tank is unlucky with disease. They were not doing anything wrong. They were following the printed instruction on a product engineered so that following the instruction is what generates the next sale. And there's a quieter version of the same harm that affects people who never lose a fish at all. A tank whose biological filtration is reset every month never reaches the capacity it could have. It is permanently running a young, thin colony rather than a mature, deep one, which means it has no reserve. A mature filter absorbs a heavy feeding, a dead fish behind the rockwork, or a week of holiday, without the readings moving. A perpetually renewed one has no margin for any of that, and the owner learns to be nervous about their own tank without ever knowing why other people seem to find this easy. So here is exactly what to buy. First, reticulated polyurethane filter foam, which is open cell foam, with the cell walls removed so water passes through the whole structure rather than around it. Sold by the sheet online and through pond suppliers. Buy the coarse grade, roughly 20 to 30 pores per inch, because fine foam clogs at the surface and chokes your flow within days. A sheet costs a few dollars and will cut into enough pieces for several filters and several years. Second, lava rock, which is sold by the bag in the garden and landscaping section of any hardware store or garden center for a few dollars, and which is the same porous volcanic mineral sold in small aquarium branded bags at many times the price per pound. Third, and optional, a small amount of polyester filter floss if you want polished water. That is the entire shopping list. That is the material. And this is the point where the fitting and the sequence decide everything. The order of the stages, the cutting, the preparation of the rock, and the changeover schedule are what separate a filter that runs untouched for years from one that clogs in a fortnight or crashes your tank in a week. The full playbook covers the filtration build along with the stocking and maintenance decisions that sit alongside it. The link is in the description and the top pinned comment, or scan the code on your screen, and it will take you there directly. Take the old cartridge out and use it as a template. Lay it on the foam sheet, draw around it, and cut slightly oversized with a long serrated bread knife or an electric carving knife, which cuts foam far more cleanly than scissors. Oversize matters because the foam has to compress into the housing so that water is forced through it rather than slipping around the edges. Then rinse the lava rock thoroughly under running water until the water runs clear, because it carries a great deal of fine dust that will cloud your tank, and put it into a fine mesh media bag. On quantity, fill whatever space the old cartridge occupied and no more, because packing a housing solid restricts flow and creates channels. If you have room for only a small handful of rock behind the foam, that is fine, and you can hang a second bag of it in the tank or in the filter chamber to add capacity without restricting anything. Then load the housing in the correct order, which is the part people get backwards. Water should meet the foam first and the rock second. The foam is your mechanical stage and it protects everything behind it. So debris is caught at the front where you can squeeze it out easily, and the rock behind stays clean and keeps its pores open for the bacteria. Reverse that order and the rock clogs with sludge and becomes very difficult to service. Then handle the changeover carefully because this is where people lose tanks. Do not remove the old cartridge and install the new media on the same day. Put the foam and the rock into the housing alongside the old cartridge if there is room, or wedge them anywhere in the flow path, and leave the old cartridge in place for 3 to 4 weeks. During that time, the colony spreads onto the new surfaces. Only once the new media has been running for a month do you remove the old cartridge, and by then it is redundant rather than essential. If your housing genuinely has no spare room, put the new media in a mesh bag hanging in the tank near the outflow for those weeks, then transfer it in. Then the maintenance, which is nearly nothing. Every 4 to 6 weeks, squeeze the foam 2 or 3 times in a bucket of water you have just removed during a water change, and put it straight back. Never rinse it under the tap, because chlorine and chloramine in tap water kill the colony you have spent weeks building. The lava rock needs a gentle swill in tank water perhaps twice a year and nothing else. The brown color on both is biofilm, which is the filter working rather than the filter being dirty. If you have already bought a pack of cartridges and do not want to waste them, you do not have to throw them out. Cut the floss and carbon away from the plastic frame with scissors, keep the frame, and use it as a holder by wrapping or wedging your cut foam around it, which solves the fitting problem in housings with awkward internal shapes. And if you like the idea of chemical filtration, buy loose activated carbon in a mesh bag rather than in a cartridge. Put it in for the 2 to 4 weeks it is actually active, and take it out when it is spent instead of replacing your entire filter contents to renew it. I want to be straightforward about the limitations, because accurate information is worth more than a clean sales pitch. The first is that you are removing chemical filtration from your filter unless you deliberately add it back, and there are situations where you genuinely want carbon. It is the correct tool for stripping medication out of the water after a treatment course, for removing tannins if you dislike the color driftwood produces, and for clearing genuine odors. Keep a small bag of loose carbon on a shelf and use it as a tool when you need it rather than running it permanently. The second is water polish. Coarse foam catches the bulk load and leaves fine particles in suspension. So if you want glass clear water, add a thin layer of filter floss in front of the foam and rinse, or replace it when it loads, which is the one genuinely consumable item in this setup and costs almost nothing. The third is that some filter housings are designed with a bypass, meaning water can slip past the media if it is not fitted snugly. Check that your foam is compressed against the walls of the chamber rather than sitting loose in it, and watch the flow for the first week. Now, here's the mistake that undoes all of this, and it is the same mistake every time. Servicing everything at once. Somebody converts their filter correctly, then on maintenance day squeezes out the foam, rinses the lava rock, and changes the floss in a single session, and in doing so disturbs every bacterial surface in the system simultaneously. The entire point of running separate media on separate schedules is that one mature colony is always intact and carrying the tank while another recovers. Squeeze the foam on one visit. If the rock ever needs attention, do it on a different visit weeks later. Never clean two biological surfaces in the same week. Split media that gets cleaned together is not split media. It is a cartridge with extra steps, and you will have rebuilt the exact problem you just spent $8 escaping. None of this is unusual outside of the aquarium aisle. Every commercial aquaculture system and every serious breeding facility on Earth runs foam and porous mineral media, chosen for surface area and cleaned on a rotation, and not one of them buys a disposable proprietary cartridge, because at that scale the economics of a consumable format are immediately visible and completely unacceptable. Porous volcanic rock has been used to filter water for as long as people have lived near volcanoes. The materials are ancient, inert, and unremarkable. The only genuinely modern piece of engineering in your filter is the shape of the plastic frame, which was designed with considerable care to make sure that nothing else fits. If you want the complete system rather than just the media, the full aquarium playbook covers the filtration build end to end, the changeover schedule, the maintenance rotation that keeps a colony mature, and the stocking and feeding decisions that determine how much biological capacity you actually need. It is all in one place, in the order you actually need it. The link is in the description and in the top pinned comment, and you can scan the code on your screen to go straight to it. And if this changed how you think about that plastic frame in your filter, give it a like and subscribe, because there is a great deal more where this came from.